So I missed you for the past 2 weeks. I was in Chutz La'aretz, and it was an amazing 2 weekends in Chutz La'aretz with a lot of Harbotzes Torah. I spent my first Shabbos in Philadelphia. It was a Shabbos of Achdus. I spoke 14 times in different shuls, different moistes, different schools. And from Philly, I went to Lakewood, Passaic, Teaneck, Brooklyn, and spent the other Shabbos in Woodmere. Once again, a lot of Harbotzes Torah. But it's always a pleasure to come back home, come back to the yeshivas, and come back to Eretz Kodshenu. So Baruch Hashem, we're together again. And as you probably realize from my voice, I'm not feeling very well, but Baruch Hashem, I try not to lose any opportunity for Harbotzes Torah. So the sugya we will be discussing today as we finish Chumash Bereishis, and Yaakov Avinu gives a bracha to each of his great children, Yud Beis Shiftei Ka, Zvulun L'chof Yamim Yishkon, V'hu L'chof Oniyos V'yarchosei Al Tzidon. And this is one of the sources of the concept Yissachar-Zevulun that many Avrechim are familiar with. As Rashi writes on this posuk, Shahoya Zvulun oisek beparkamatya. Zvulun was a businessman. He had many ships traveling with cargo on the seaways. V'mamtzi mozon l'shevet Yissachar v'hem oiskim b'toira. Hu she'omer Moshe smach Zvulun b'tzeisecho v'Yissachar b'ohalecho. Zvulun yotze beparkamatya v'Yissachar osek b'toira b'ohalim. Parkamatya, I don't know the exact translation, loosely translated business. So Zvulun were the workers. They supplied the means for Yissachar to sit and learn, and they shared the reward. From the Lashon of Rashi, it doesn't seem that they had any formal agreement or signed a contract. It's just the mere fact that Zvulun supplies for Yissachar and enables Yissachar to learn Torah, and that is why Zvulun merits Sachar. He is rewarded for supporting Torah. However, Rashi in Parshas V'Zois HaBrocha, and that is when Moshe Rabbeinu bestows his brachas on the Shvotim, Rashi says something different. Source number 2. Smach Zvulun b'tzeisecho v'Yissachar b'yolecho. Zvulun v'Yissachar osu shutfus. They had a partnership. Zvulun l'chof yamim yishkon, v'yotze leparkamatya, b'sfinot u'mistaker, v'noisen l'toch piv shel Yissachar, v'hem yoshvim v'oiskim b'toira. So they did have partnership, formal agreement. So what is Yissachar-Zevulun about? Is it just the merit of Talmidei Torah, or is some kind of contractual agreement, some business deal? What is Yissachar-Zevulun? Medrash Tanchuma, in this week's parsha, Zvulun l'chof amim, kodem Zvulun Yissachar, shezvulun oisek b'parkamatya v'Yissachar oisek b'toira, also shutfus b'neihem. So it's interesting. Rashi in Parshas V'yechi, where the Medrash appears, doesn't quote the Medrash. But Dafka in Parshas V'Zois HaBrocha, Rashi coincides with the Medrash in Parshas V'yechi. Seems to be a machlokes between the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah. Reish Mem Vav Seif Aleph. We don't have the Shulchan Aruch on our sheet. We should have, but it's not on our sheet. But I'll just quote the Shulchan Aruch. Misha Eina Yochal Lilmoid. Person that can't learn, whether it's he is so busy he doesn't have time, or he just isn't literate enough to learn. He should supply for others that learn, and then it will be considered as if he is learning as well. The Ramo adds on to the Mechaber, ויוכל אדם להסלוס עם חברוי, שהוא יעסק בתורה והוא ימציא לו פרנסה ויחלוק עמו בשכר. The Ramo writes, you could make a deal, and you could have an agreement with another. You're going to supply for me, I'm going to learn, and we will share the reward. Shulchan seems to coincide Rashi Pashas V'Yachi. The Ramo has a source in Rashi Pashas V'Zayis. So the Ramo talks about an agreement between two parties, but the Shulchan merely says, if you can't learn, supply for others, provide for others that are learning, and then it'll be considered as if you're learning as well. So we have some interesting precedents regarding Yissachar-Zevulun, regarding this concept. Saita Chof Aleph. The Gemara deals with a posuk in Shira Shirim. Im yiten ish kol hoin beisar ba'ava, boiz yavozulo. What are we talking about? So the Gemara says, Lo kishim Rachi Azaria, v'lo kereb Yochanan de ben Nesiah, elal kehilal v'shavna. Dechi oser Rav Dime Omar, Hillel v'shavna achi havu. Hillel v'shavna are two brothers. Hillel osik b'Torah, Shavna oved iska, l'saf omalei, to na'arov v'liflug. Hillel was the scholar. He sat and learned Yom v'Layla. Shavna was the businessman. Hillel learned a lot of Torah. And then Shavna tells Hillel, you know, I'm going to pay you money, and let's share your Torah. Yotzu baskal v'amra, im yiten ish kol hoim beisei ba'avo, boiz yavosolo. So what was the difference between Shimon Achi Azariah, Rabbi Yochanan de ben Nesiah, and Hillel v'Shavna? Who was Shimon Achi Azariah? And Tana mentioned only once in the entire Shisha Sidra Mishnah. And that is the very first Mishnah, Masechet Zvochim. And that's a strange name, Shimon Achi Azariah. In days of yore, both in the days of the Tanoim and in the days of the Ameroim, most giants were named Al Shem Avoisehem. We're all familiar with Reb Shimon bar Yochai, Reb Yossi ben Chalafta, Reb Yochanan ben Zakkai, Rav Chanina bar Choma, who was an Amoira, but none of them is named after his brother. So why is Shimon Achi Azariah unique? Rashi explains, Azariah was the businessman, Shimon was the scholar. Azariah provided for Shimon. He should be able to learn and grow in Torah. Lekvoidoi shel Azariah, Shimon was called Shimon Achi Azariah. So Rashi in Zvochim Dav Beis, Shimon Achi Azariah. Al Shem she'Azariah asak בפרקמטיה, וסיפק צורכי שמעון אחיו, בשעה שהיה עושה בתורה, והיסנו ביניהם שחלק לעזריה בשכר תלמודו של שמעון, כי דאמרינא בסייתו. So Rashi says, yes, they had an agreement. However, Rashi in Masechet Saita writes, Azariah was the businessman. He provided for Shimon. Shimon learned Torah. And that is why Azariah is part of it. And Rashi does not mention that they had any formal agreement. So the two different Rashis regarding Shimon Achi Azariah coincide with the two different Rashis ala Chumash. Rashi Parshas Ve'echi and Rashi in Parshas V'Zayis. And that seems to be very interesting. And it seems to be two different approaches between the Shulchan Aruch that merely says, if you can't learn, provide for others. Does that have to do with Yissachar-Zevulun? Of course it does. Because the Shulchan Aruch is based on the Tur. And the Tur writes, if you can't learn, provide for others. and it will be considered as if you learn yourself. As Chazal explained on the Pasuk, Smach Zvulun b'tzeisecha v'Yissachar b'ohalecha. Are there two different approaches or not? Seems to be clear they are. Which brings us source number 7. We won't go through this. It's very long. But I do suggest those of you that really want to delve into the depth of Sugya, this is the most important source. Tshuvas Maram al-Shakar. And it's not the Maram al-Shakar. He quotes a Tshuva Ksad Yad from Rav Hai Gaon. We will only read the first line, the last line, and maybe some in the middle. עוד שאלת, אם יש ממש באותם שמוכרים זכויותיהם זה לזה, אם זכה הקונה, או הפסיד המוכר, ואם פעולה זו יש לה עיקר. Does it make sense? When people do deals, and one sells to the other, שכר מצווה. תשובה, לא מצאתי מקום לדבר הזה, כי אם בתשובת שאלה לרבינו היי גאון, וראיתי להעתיק אותה לך, ומשם תבין עיקרן של דברים. שאלוהו ז"ל. Maybe Zay Lamed means זה לשונו. And the entire tshuva is Rav Hai Gaon. Let's have a look at the last line. וכל דבריו דברי קבלה הן, אין להוסיף ולא לגרוע. ושם כנפש אביך, מוישה אל אשכר. So he only quotes Rav Hai Gaon. And Rav Hai Gaon is very clear. He says, you cannot sell Olam Haba. It's not yours. It's not a purchase. You have nothing to sell, and you have nothing to buy. It's nonsense. And he quotes a posuk in Novi Yeshayahu. Tzidkat HaTzadik lo tihiyeh. Rishat HaRosha lo yihiyeh. If you did evil deeds, if you have an Aveda, you'll never escape your punishment. And if you learn Torah, you did mitzvahs, you will always be awarded. You have nothing to sell, you have nothing to buy. So what is Yissachar-Zevulun about? Zevulun notel schar pu'ulato. Zevulun is rewarded because of what he did. And what is he doing? Supporting Torah. Yissachar-Zevulun is all about the merit of supporting Torah. That it's all about. It's not a purchase. It's not a partnership. So all the sources that speak about Shutfis, it's a medrash. Rav Hai Gaon was a Goin, but the medrash comes before the Tkufas HaGoinim. It's Rashi, two different sources. V'zois HaBrocha, Zvochem Dav Beis, the story of Shimon Achi Azariah. So if it's all about the reward of supporting Torah, what's the Shutfis? Of a present-day Gedolim, the most important source is the Moshe Feinstein. He gives Moshe Chelik Daled Yoredei Simen Lamed Zayin. Moshe has a very long tshuva, even by the standards of Igris Moshe. Sometimes he has very long tshuvas, and even in his standard, this is an extremely long tshuva, and it's divided in 20 chapters. What is surprising is such a long tshuva, and he quotes neither Maram al-Shakar nor the Beis Yosef in Tshuvas Afkas Reichel. And these are the two most important sources regarding Yissachar-Zevulun. Is that a surprise? If it would be any other Shalos Tshuvas, it would be a surprise. But bearing in mind that Sigras Moshe, it's not a surprise, because the Moshe very rarely quotes Shalos Tshuvas. The Moshe style was, you remember Shas Bal Peh, the Rishonim, the Rambam, the Shulchan Aruch, doesn't quote many Tshuvas. But we would expect, and the right thing, when you're oisek in a sugi extensively, to quote Rav Hai Gaon, the most important source dealing with this question, and the Beis Yosef. It is Shuvas Afkas Reichel. So the Moshe's opinion is Yissachar-Zevulun is like any other investment and business deal. And therefore you can't pay for your Yissachar out of Maisa money. Cannot be taken from Maisa. It's an investment. You're investing in real estate. You're investing in real estate up there. Best investment you could ever make. You know, it's not affected by inflation or deflation or any financial crisis. The market will go up and down, but that is really what Chazal call nechse de lo naida. They don't move. But it's just like any other investment. You can't take that out of Maisa money. And Moshe argues, if you want 50% in a Yissachar Torah, you need to give 50% of all your earnings. It doesn't depend how much Yissachar needs. It depends how much Zevulun earns. And that is a huge chiddush. Moshe does make one exception. If Zevulun is fabulously rich, and he's worth $1 billion, or $10 million, I don't know how to define one that is fabulously rich. It's a relative concept. In that case, the Moshe says Zevulun doesn't need to give Yissachar 50% of what he has. Obviously, if Yissachar will get 50% of what Zevulun has, he might stop being a Yissachar. And that is very likely. So the Moshe, his only compromise is, if Zevulun doesn't want to give 50% of what he has because he wants to support many other Yissachars, then he's entitled to do so. But the Moshe's approach to Yissachar-Zevulun, it's a business deal. It's an investment. And it has nothing to do with Hilchas Tzedakah.
The wealthy Zevulun will still get half of all the Yissachars?
What? Yeah. It's hard for me to get into all the details of the Moshe's opinion because I so strongly disagree with the Igros Moshe. I have tremendous admiration. To me, after the Chazon Ish, the Moshe was the giant. And you know what I said now was somewhat of a daring statement, but that's the way I view the Igros Moshe. And many times I tell my Talmidim, there's no Godel of our times that I so much admire as the Igros Moshe. There is no Godel I so much disagree with as the Igros Moshe. Because he had a unique style in halacha, which is not the style and the tradition that I follow. The Moshe is like a bulldozer, like the biggest bulldozer ever produced. He goes his way, and everything that stands in his way is just pushed aside. You know, in the tradition that I grew up with, yes, we won't write a tshuva about Yissachar-Zevulun without quoting the Maram al-Shakar and the Beis Yosef and the Chassam Sofer and the Noida B'Yehuda and all the great Achronim. So anyway, Rav Moshe's approach is Yissachar-Zevulun is a deal and has nothing to do with tzedakah. The Afkas Reichel seems to be similar, not to the extreme of Rav Moshe, but the Afkas Reichel also says, Yissachar-Zevulun, Hilchas Tzedakah doesn't apply. You can't give Yissachar-Zevulun out of Maisa money. Beis Yosef says the same. By Yissachar-Zevulun, there is no din aniyah ichu koidmim. And you could choose a Yissachar that lives 10,000 miles away, even though there are many Talmidei Chachamim in your town. In Hilchas Tzedakah, aniyah ichu come before. But if it's a deal, I could invest wherever I wish. And if I like a certain Yissachar, no matter where he is, I'm entitled to have an agreement with him. So after quoting the main opinions, let me share with you my Havana and my approach to Yissachar-Zevulun. And my approach is based on bringing together the Rashis, the Shulchan Aruch, and the Afkas Reichel, and what seems to be two different opinions, and my mahalach is a derech hamamutza. It is clear to me that Maram al-Shakar is right. Olam haba is not yours to sell, and there's no such a thing you buy olam haba. Olam haba is a dover shalaboli olam. It's a dover she'ein bo mamish. It has more mamoshes than anything we could ever imagine. But in Choshe Mishpot, down here, it would be defined as a dover she'ein bo mamish. There's no such a thing buying olam haba. Like the Maram al-Shakar so powerfully says, Tzidkes atzadak lo tiyeh, rishtes harosha lo tiyeh. But it is a shutfus. The shutfus is not in the reward, it's a shutfus in learning. It's like chavrusa. Like the Torah in the Shulchan Aruch write. If you can't learn yourself, provide for another, and it will be considered as if you're learning. That's the key. That's what it's all about. If you provide for a Talmid Chacham and he learns, it's considered as if you learn as well. As if you're both learning. Without your support, he couldn't be learning. If you enable him to learn, it is as if you're learning. As if the both of you are learning together. That is the concept. So why do we need an agreement? What is this agreement about if it's all about supporting Torah? The added value of Yissachar-Zevulun is the fact that Yissachar knows he has whom to rely on. Someone out there took upon himself to provide for him on a steady basis. And Yissachar doesn't need to get up every day in the morning and wonder and worry, ma nochal me'ato. What's going to be with the day after tomorrow? That is the added value of Yissachar-Zevulun. And that's what makes them partners. And that is why Yissachar is learning Torah in the help of Zevulun, and Zevulun is a partner in Yissachar's Torah. Hachzakas Torah is great, but there's added value in a formal agreement between Yissachar and Zevulun. An interesting comment and a diuk in Rashi. Rashi et Zvochim. Shimon Achi Azariah. Al Shem Azariah Osik B'Parkamati V'Sipik Tzorche Shimon Ocha B'Shosh Osik B'Toira. V'Yisnu B'Neim She'echelek L'Azariah B'Schar Talmudo Shel Shimon. It's not the Rashi I meant to quote. Rashi in Dvorim, source number 2. Zvulun v'Yissachar asu shutvis. Zvulun l'chof yamim yishkoin, v'yoytze l'parkamati b'sfinis u'mistakra. V'noysten l'toch piv shel Yissachar, v'hem yoshvim, v'oiskim b'toira. What is the shutvis? This seems to be a one-sided agreement. Zvulun does business, he supplies for Yissachar. What is Yissachar giving? Rashi doesn't say. So what's Yissachar's obligation? Zevulun gives money to Yissachar. It's a one-sided agreement. If Zevulun takes upon himself to support Yissachar, he has a chelik in Yissachar's Torah. Whether Yissachar has that in mind or not, because Yissachar actually isn't giving anything. He cannot give away schar olam haba. The fact that Yissachar learns because Yissachar supports him, that is as if Zevulun is learning as well. And that is the shutfus. It's a shutfus in Talmud. It's not a shutfus in the Sachar. So on one hand, there's no stira between Rashi. The concept is like the Shulchan Aruch and the Torah and the Torah right. If you supply to others and provide for them. And your support gives them the ability to learn. It is as if you are learning as well. And the shutfus is in learning. It is as if you're learning b'chavrus. So why is the minig that Yissachar does promise to learn for Zevulun? It's the right thing to do. It's not ma'akev, but it's the right thing. There are so many sources proving that a person could learn Torah and be Mekayim mitzvahs in the merit of others. For the past 2.5 months since this war broke out, almost every shiur I give, I speak about this. We, B'nai Torah, we need to learn for the soldiers. We need to daven for them. Is there a concept that I learn Torah for others? Yes, there is. And you could do mitzvahs for others. Could we explain this based on halachic principles? No. Not everything we could explain. Mesoidos habriya. But it is clear. For ages, we've been learning Mishnayos le'ilui nishmas niftorim. What's the difference between the living and the dead? If we could learn le'ilui nishmas niftorim, we could also learn le'ilui nishmas hachayim imono. It's the same. So a person could learn for others. He could do mitzvahs for others. And that is why Yissachar promises, I'm going to learn for you, Zevulun, because you support me. But Zevulun is considered as if he is learning even without Yissachar learning for him, because Yissachar is enabled to learn by Zevulun's support. And that is what Yissachar-Zevulun is all about. It's about shutfus in learning. It's not about a purchase of olam haba. That is impossible. So on one hand, yes, it's an agreement, a contractual agreement. It's a shutfus. But Rav Hai Gaon is right, and the Tur is right, and the Shulchan Aruch is right. Essentially, basically, supporting Torah and enabling others to learn is as if you're learning yourself. Why do we need an agreement? Because the added value of an agreement is Yissachar learns with more clarity, more menuchas nefesh. He knows that somebody will support him on an ongoing basis. So there's a big controversy. Does Yissachar lose out when he has an agreement with Zevulun? The Pele Yoyetz attacks all the Yissachars in the world. And he says, why would a person sell olam haba for a nezid adashim money bi olam hazeh? It is preferable to learn Torah metoich hatchak, metoich ha'oini, and not lose part of your olam haba. No money in the world, $1 billion, cannot buy one daf Gemara. So why would you sell your olam haba for financial support? What I say today, I already apologized. It goes against many sources. But kach nera lani usdaiti. And I encourage Yissachars to have a Zevulun. It's tov levov. Why wouldn't you be a tov lev? Why do you care if another person is considered as if he is learning as well? You are losing nothing. Why would Yissachar lose out? Two people are learning together in the same Beis Medrash. Both learn 15 hours a day, Reuven and Shimon. Reuven had a very rich Baba, and she left him a big Yerusha. So Baruch Hashem, he doesn't need support from anyone else. He lives off his Baba's Yerusha. Shimon didn't have a rich Baba, or maybe he does, but she's Marich Yomim, so he didn't get a Yerusha yet. And he lives in poverty. So Zevulun supports him. Would it be fair? Both are learning the same. Why would Shimon get less zachar than Reuven? Because Reuven happened to have a rich Baba that left him inheritance. So why does Shimon deserve less zachar than Reuven? It just doesn't make sense. Saying that Yissachar loses out, it's not fair. Nimtze shuras adin loike. Two Talmidei Chachamim are learning. Both are learning Yom and Valayla. Both are learning with Mesiras Nefesh. Everything is min hashamayim. So Reuven got a big Yerusha. He doesn't need support. Shimon needs a Zevulun to support him. Why would Shimon lose out? So to me it's clear. The Yissachar doesn't lose out anything. Because the Torah says very simply, it is considered as if Shimon is learning as well. It is considered as if Zevulun is learning together with Yissachar. Two people learn b'chavrusa. Do they need to share the pie? No. Each of them gets a pie for himself. And none of them loses out by the fact they're learning together. Zevulun and Yissachar learn together. And both get entire Sechar. I don't think so. The Pele Yoetz understands that Zevulun gives away 50% of his Torah. Like Reb Moshe, like the Avkas Roichel. Like the Avkas Roichel. The Avkas Roichel writes that Zevulun and Yissachar is considered as if Yissachar is learning a half a day and working a half a day. And Zevulun, even though he's working all day, would be considered he's learning half a day and working a half a day. But once again, I say my opinion, based primarily on Av Haigon, which has so much appeal to me, and the Tur and the Shulchan Aruch, in Siman Reish Mem Vav Sif Aleph in Yored Deya. So the question is the Yissachar losing out? Many Achronim deal with this question. The Or HaChaim HaKodesh Sosar Devorov. Or HaChaim Pashkis Tisiso writes, Yissachar doesn't lose out at all. Hafla writes the same in his amazing introduction, B'derech Drush, Sefer Hafla, Ois Mem Gimel. Or HaChaim has a Sefer Chayfetz Hashem HaMesechet Broches. Broches Daf Ches, he writes, yes, Yissachar loses 50% of his Torah. So this is a huge discussion, and therefore I feel free to say my understanding and my opinion. So in my Shtar Yissachar-Zevulun, there is a stipulation. The validity of this document is dependent on the opinion of the Minchas Osher in Chumash Bereishis Siman so and so. So many of Reichen prefer using my Shtar Yissachar-Zevulun because then you're on the safe side. You have nothing to lose because there's a Tanai Mefurish, a stipulation that the validity of this shtar is dependent on the opinion of the Minchas Osher. So to me it is clear, Zevulun doesn't lose out. How much is Yissachar doesn't lose out. How much is Zevulun getting? It's impossible to quantify. The schar of Zevulun depends how much money are you giving, how hard it is for you to give this money. So the schar of Zevulun is dependent. It's not reasonable that a billionaire that gives $500 a month would get the same as a person that really, really is hard for him to give. Hakalafir of amasa. So the one that's learning is learning. Even a person that's learning, said the difference whether he learns Torah Lishma, whether he learns Torah B'Tahara. So the same is Zevulun. It depends how much effort it is for Zevulun. Fundamentally, my opinion is this agreement is more in the realm, in the spiritual realm. It's more in Ruchnius. It's not a business deal. It's not about percentage points, and therefore it definitely doesn't need to be a 50-50 deal. You could have a Heskem Yissachar-Zevulun, and you support a third of what Zevulun needs, or half of what he needs, if you can't afford to support all his needs. So many people offered me a Yissachar-Zevulun agreement throughout the years, and I never agreed. Not because I'm choishish to the Pele Yoetz. I am in the opinion of the Minchas Osher, not the opinion of the Pele Yoetz. But Baruch Hashem, I always had parnasa, and I didn't feel that I learned better or I learned more if people gave me money. So from my point of view, signing a Heskem Yissachar-Zevulun would be gezel, because the entire concept Yissachar-Zevulun is Zevulun is supporting Yissachar and enabling Yissachar to learn. So I was never desperate for money. Baruch Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu always cared for me. I'm not rich. I'm not supposed to be rich. A Marbet Torah is not supposed to be rich. But I always had enough, Baruch Hashem, to support my family. And therefore, I'm not eligible to sign Yissachar-Zevulun because it's not a business deal. It's all about enabling a Yissachar to learn. But most Yissachar-Zevulun deals, and my Evrechim, I got for them quite a few Zevuluns. And b'derech kal, the Zevulun cannot give the Yissachar as much money as he really needs. But still, it is a valid deal. You're supporting Yissachar, you're enabling him to learn better, with more yishuv hadas, and therefore you get zachar ki'ilu lomed ba'atzmo. But the zachar of Zevulun depends on many factors. Not only how much his money needs to the Yissachar, but also how much of an effort it is for him to give. So according to the approach, it's a business deal. It wouldn't depend at all if it's hard on Zevulun or not. When you invest in real estate, you deserve the same return, whether you're fabulously rich or you're poor. You get a return according to your investment. This is not an investment. It's not a business deal. It's all about ruchnius, and therefore it depends on the Torah of Yissachar, but also on the Mesiras Nefesh and the effort it takes for Zevulun. So that is my approach regarding Yissachar-Zevulun. So once again, I'm happy you asked this question. Parents supporting their children that learn in Koilel. Would that be Yissachar-Zevulun? Fundamentally, yes, because parents are not mechuyev to support their children. But based on my explanations that I just explained, it would be a very limited schar for the Zevulun, because it is natural that parents support their children. Many parents would support their children even if they're not learning in Koilel. So it's so natural that parents care for their children. It is a similar question, could I give my maisa money to my children? Al pi halacha, of course you could. Mipsarchu al tisalem. In Hilchas Saduki, you should support family before you support others. And therefore, when people ask me, could I give my maisa money to my children? I say, by halachic definition, yes. But it's not the right thing to give all your maisa money to your children, because you really don't have the source of tzedakah. Tzedakah means giving away. Tzedakah means parting from your money. I always tell my kids, when I give you money, to me, it's like taking money out of this pocket and putting it to my other pocket. It's in the family. It's natural. We love to support our children. And therefore, by halachic definition, you could give maisa to your kids because you're not mechuyev to support them. But it's not the right thing to do. I say 50% of your maisa, give to your kids, if it's hard to support them without maisa. But you need to leave substantial monies to give to the classical concept of tzedakah, which is mean give away your money. Don't take it from one pocket into the other pocket. Tzedakah is about giving away. It's by caring for others when it's not natural. If not for the mitzvah of tzedakah, probably you wouldn't support them. Caring for aniyim because they're aniyim, because they're desperate. And that is what tzedakah is all about. The same with Yissachar-Zevulun. If I'm not mechuyev to support my kids, I could have a Yissachar-Zevulun. But your sachar would be, on the scale, it would be reduced. I would say 2 on a Richter scale. Because it's natural. You're supporting your kids. So don't expect to get a great deal out of this agreement. So everything I said today is a devar chiddush, but to me it seems poshet betachlas apshitas. So let me tell you about a different Yissachar-Zevulun concept. And it's the Yissachar-Zevulun in days of war. We're all familiar with Yissachar-Zevulun in days of peace. And that is what we discussed up to this point. And that very same posuk, Smach Zevulun b'tzeisecho, v'Yissachar b'yolecho, there's an amazing Targum Onkelos. And before I quote Onkelos, Onkelos is the most important commentary on Torah's Moshe. Rashi quotes Onkelos all the time. On that very same posuk, the Onkelos writes, Chadi Zevulun b'mafkei la'agocha krova al balei devaveich. Zevulun is happy to go out and wage war with our enemies. V'Yissachar b'yolecho. That is Yissachar-Zevulun. So all the Jungelite that benefit from Yissachar-Zevulun in peace days should know there's another side to this agreement in days of war. When Zevulun goes out to fight, you need to learn. It's also a Zohar. The Zohar, surprisingly, is not in Parshas V'yechi and not in Parshas V'zois HaBrocha, but in Parshas B'haloischa. And the Zohar on the very same posuk, Hadodech siv smach Zevulun b'tzeisecho v'Yissachar b'yolecho. So when Zevulun goes to fight the enemy, Yissachar goes to learn Torah. V'du yohev chelke ledu, v'do yohev chulke ledo. Zevulun shares what he has with Yissachar, and Yissachar shares his Torah with Zevulun. So it's a Zohar. It's an Onkelos. I'm surprised that the Netziv in Hemik Davar writes the same Medata de Nafshei. I'm not surprised that the Netziv doesn't quote the Zohar. I'm not sure how far the Netziv was versed in the Zohar. But the Netziv is one of the most important commentaries on Torah. How come he didn't realize it's the Onkelos on the spot? And then Netziv writes, V'zois la'olam al Yisrael, kisheyotzim lemilchama, miyachadim anoshim lilmod Torah v'tfila kol hayom. That is the meaning of Beis Yisrael. When we wage war, we are miyached others to dedicate their entire day to learn Torah and to daven. So I tell all my friends at Talmidim B'nai Torah, we believe in Torah. We believe the army needs your Torah. And without your Torah, we don't win wars. That's a Gemara Marcus Yudom and Aleph. Mi gorem לרגלינו לנצח במלחמה שער ירושלים שעוסקים בתורה. או אם דסחוי רגלינו בשער ירושלים, that's a Gemara. However, you need that special effort. These are not normal days. They are not peaceful days. So in peaceful days, you have one Heskim Yissachar-Zevulun. In days of war, it's different. And you need to learn Kol Hayom. I think in these times, every Jew that believes in HaKadosh Baruch Hu and believes in Chazal needs to take upon themselves some Kabbalah, something extra. In the Schus of Klal Yisrael, soldiers are dying every day. So many of them, Talmidei Chachamim and Marbitzei Torah, they need our support, and you need to feel their pain. I knew many of the soldiers that were killed and many that were wounded. And it is our responsibility. So I was in America, and I told you, since this war broke out, I've been dealing with so many shilas, dealing with halachic issues and giving chizuk. So the sweetest question I had regarding the war was this week in America. An 11-year-old kid, he seemed to be 11 or 12 years old, comes to me and he says, Rebbe, I heard your drosha, and I took something upon myself. I took upon myself to stand by Chazor's Hashatz. And I have a question, he says. Do I need to stand by Chazos Hashatz only if I daven Lachash and I'm listening to the Shliach Tzibur? Or if I happen to be in Shul and I'm in the middle of Psukkah de Zimra or Krishma, I also need to stand up by Chazos Hashatz. Tough question. Not the toughest I dealt with since the war broke out, but I was moved. So the other day when I spoke to a few hundred people, I said, at least this 11-year-old boy took me seriously. I hope you people take me as seriously as that little boy. Everybody needs some Kabbalah to take upon yourself. I don't recommend it should be standing by Chazos Hashatz. That was beautiful for that kid. I think Talmidei Chachamim should take upon themselves something somewhat more substantial. Another hour of Torah every day. Another 5 kapitlach of Tehillim every day. Do something extra. People are dying. Families are grieving. And it's heartbreaking. So you need to take upon yourself something special, something extra. More Torah, more Tefillah, more Chesed. Yehi Ratzon. Kodesh Baruch Hu should listen to our Tefillahs. He always listens to our Tefillahs. But we should be zeicher that this terrible war should be over, should be over, and all those soldiers should come home l'chaim v'lesimcha v'leshalom v'tishkei ta'oretz ad bias goel tzedek b'mheru v'yomeinu ha'amen.